And now for our feature presentation.
Are you ready?
Streaming live around the world, this is Paper Cuts with Brad and Jay.
Hey, what a stupid question.
Oh, I've already had 2 glasses too of Tennessee whiskey.
Jay, you've done so good, and you have to muck it up right at the end. Jay's gray. He's all gray now. Look at his beard.
I mean, I got grayer, right? I mean, everyone in the chat, thanks for stopping by and enjoying yourselves. We know you did. There's 3 legends here with us.
Tonight we talk about letters to the Purple Satin Killer with Joshua Chaplinsky.
Welcome to the show.
All right, everyone, welcome to a Saturday edition of Paper Cuts. Quick thanks to everyone who told your spouse or your significant other that we're not going to go out tonight and party because we need to stay home and watch the latest episode of Paper Cuts. I appreciate that. Brad appreciates that. Brad's over there in Kentucky. I'm here as usual. Now, both Brad and I, we're fans of the now defunct show on Netflix, Mindhunter. Mm-hmm. So it was a no-brainer when we had a chance to chat with our guest this evening about his upcoming book, Letters to the Purple Satin Killer, because it just had us written all over it. Anyone else with fans of that show too?
My greasy old fingerprints all over it. Jeez.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's not. Was that potato chips? You got to eat butter from popcorn. You got it. Welcome to the program, Joshua Chaplinsky. I said it right, correct?
That is correct, Chaplinsky. Thank you for having
If I do anything this evening, I got the name right.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. Josh, welcome to the show. I don't know if you know much about the show, but
I know you guys got a snazzy intro.
Yeah, forget everything you heard.
It's all downhill from here, Josh. That was the highlight of the show.
That's the highlight. We're going to maybe test your knowledge of serial killers a little later.
Uh-oh. Okay.
But let's just get right into it. Who's your favorite serial killer?
Ooh. Favorite.
Yeah.
Favorite.
Just gotta love those guys. You know, it's so hard to choose. So many great serial killers.
What a great way to start the show, Jay.
So many great serial killers out there have done such great work. It's really,
which one do you admire the most? Right.
I mean, well, I will say that a lot of Letters to the Purple Satin Killer, the main character, Jonas Williker, a lot of the big beats of the story were kind of based on Ted Bundy, at least as far as what happened after he was caught and like the shenanigans with him in the courtroom and stuff like that.
Right.
And him escaping a couple times. And so I would say, Ted Bundy's up there. He's one of the greats. One of the big influences.
I say that because jokingly, but there are probably admirers of serial killers out there.
Oh yeah.
That might read this and be like, you know what? That's kind of like the BTK. Maybe that's little Charles Manson. Maybe that's what I mean. Just out of nowhere, just started to relate to it. And then you have the copycat ones that they can't live up to proper potential. They have to copycat.
And they have no originality of their own.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. So, Joshua, thank you so much for joining us. What are you normally doing on a Saturday night? Are we interrupting your plans for Saturday?
Actually, well, I like to lay low as often as possible, especially when in the day job I'm in work mode and I'm working a lot. Mm-hmm. So this is nice. Saturday evening home alone is a good excuse to tell my friends, I can't come out. I got important
exactly
business. I got to promote my book. I can't make it to so-and-so's birthday bash or whatever. So this suits me just fine.
Well, I mean, that way you don't have to come up with an excuse to leave early from the party. So.
Oh yeah, I'm a notorious early leaver.
Right.
And I usually give the Irish goodbye, where there's so many people. If you say goodbye to everyone, that's half the night in itself. So just slip on out of there.
Peace out.
I normally like when we first get to a party, I normally start saying my goodbyes right away because it takes.
Don't even say hello. Just start with goodbye. I'll be leaving.
Hour later, I'm in the car waiting for the wife, or we're just trying to get out of there. So
yeah, smart move.
So we have in a couple of weeks the release of this book, right? What are we August 6th?
Yeah,
is that correct?
August 6th. So about a little under 3 weeks.
Nice.
Are you
So
doing
the
some
name-
sort of tour or anything with it?
Not a tour per
signings?
se. I'm going to be doing a couple readings. The publisher Clash is helping me. They're going to be setting up a few readings for me here in New York. I'd like to do some traveling, hit some, do some readings out of state, do some cons or whatever. But I think the consensus is we really got to wait and see until after the book comes out what kind of opportunities come my way. I'd love to, hit some of the horror cons and stuff. I've never really done that, the horror con thing. So, once I have a book to promote, anything that comes up, I think I'm going to try to hit stuff that's in drivable distance.
Can you tell whoever's watching and listening what the book is about? The title's kind of gives it away, but more in depth, what is Letters to the
Sure,
Purple
it's
Satin Killer? What's it about?
It's about a serial killer named Jonas Williker, and it's told through letters written to him. You don't get to read any responses he may write back to these people. The whole story is told through letters written to him while he's on trial and while he's on death row leading up to his execution. Friends, family members, so-called, fans, like we were talking about, like, that exists in the real world. Fans of serial killers, people who write to serial killers and tell them about how much they admire them. They want to meet them. They want to marry them. That stuff happens all the time.
And some are very explicit, by the way.
Sure. I mean, I was reading one true crime book, and it was talking about how one serial killer was writing to people on the outside, and they were amazed that no one was checking these letters for content because this killer was, if he had a rapport with someone and kind of made a connection with them, he would just start telling them stuff about murders, and some of them even, it seemed like information on murders that weren't attributed to him or weren't solved, and there was nobody kind of like, following up and investigating in case he dropped some, potential tidbits,
Yeah.
That's interesting because, nothing's really being monitored. So, like, he could have a full confession in one of these letters out.
Sure.
And other people may have full confessions and letters coming into them.
Yeah.
Of unsolved murders,
They're supposed to check the mail, but in some of the research and reading I did, people get lazy, they slack off on the job, or they just don't care, and stuff gets through.
Right.
I found the way you lay this out really interesting, that it's all letters to him and nothing from his perspective. Was that like a specific point you wanted to make? You only wanted it to be stuff written to him and never have anything from his point of view at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a decision I made early on, and I can't remember exactly why I made that decision, other than the fact that I thought it was just a cool little flourish, like a kind of a rule to put on myself while I was writing, be like, oh, it can only be letters to him. We're not going to hear from him, And then as I wrote and got along in the process, it kind of made more sense to me in terms of, he's essentially the main character of the book, and he's this awful person who's done awful things. And you don't necessarily want to glorify him, and I just found that it was a good way to, get inside his head and see what he was about without actually living inside his head, and kind of like it, getting a little too grimy.
Right. Well, I mean, it allows you to fill in the blanks a little bit, because some of the responses from the letters he wrote out that we don't read are referenced in some of the letters that he's reading. A couple of them said, thanks for writing back. Let me ask you about this part you mentioned. So then you start wondering, okay, well, what's he writing back, and what's in the confession? Maybe he's doing the confession. Maybe he's given more insight to what the FBI didn't figure out and stuff like that. So it allows like a little detour to figure out what's he actually writing back to some of these fans and friends and stuff on the outside. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's a little more fun that way. It's a little more of a mystery to be solved because you're getting these bits and pieces from different people, and they're not all reliable. You're hearing stuff from his mother about his childhood, and then you're getting letters from people who, oh yeah, poor mother.
We were talking before you got on about that character, the mother, the ups and downs, and the disbelief, and I, without giving away anything, but that's one I think readers are going to attach themselves to, the mother of the story. So
sure, because I mean you got to wonder in real life of the mothers, the fathers of people who have done some of these things, how they must feel, how it affects them. It's got to be awful.
Yeah.
But
go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just trying to remember where I was before that, but go on. I lost it.
So I know writers probably hate this question, probably get it all the time, but like, where did this idea come from that you wanted to only write letters to the killer instead of the other way around? This was just a cool idea popped in your head one day. I think I read it started out as a short story. Is that correct?
Yeah, it started out as a short story. It was published in Thuglit by Todd Robinson, which was a great crime magazine that doesn't exist anymore. And it was kind of early on in my short story writing career, and I really wanted to get published in Thuglit. I wanted a story in Thuglit really bad because it was a really well-respected magazine. It's a magazine I really liked. And I hadn't really written that much crime-related stuff up until that point. So I was like, all right, I got to write a crime story for Thuglit. And I had been watching the Netflix series Making a Murderer at the time. And there was this bit in it where Stephen Avery's talking. He's like, I don't remember exactly how it happened because it was a while ago, but there was, he was getting calls in jail from his, fiance. And this was a woman on the outside who he kind of met after he was arrested, and she would visit him. And then, they started a relationship and they got engaged and they would talk on the phone. And that was I found that really interesting, especially because there was some mention of, I started wondering about information exchange and how, what she would learn from him talking to him on the phone, but then maybe she would learn or hear differently from other things on the outside, and how that would affect their relationship and the kind of unreliability of the flow of information. So that was really the impetus for the story. And of course, then the fact that prisoners get letters all the time, it's one of their main forms of communication. So it just right away, the story lent itself to being told via letters. And like I said earlier, the idea of just leaving him out, I'm not really sure when and where I decided on that. But when I did hit upon it, I just thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And it's a good way. It's like, because it's really more about the other people's stories, the people writing the letters. And through their stories, you do learn a lot about the killer, Jonas Williker. But again, in the end, it's like, it just kind of eases up on the kind of awfulness of being in a serial killer's head for 400 pages,
Right. Yeah. And at the same time, trying to figure out the psyche of the people writing him, like what is attracting them so much to this, vile person, so much wanting to be married to him or sending, explicit letters or all that stuff. Just, it was outrageous. It was crazy. I mean, it was, there were times I'm like, what the hell did I just read? But it was so entertaining that it was just like I couldn't stop, so. But
as outrageous as some of that stuff is, most of it was based on stuff that has happened in real life. So
yeah,
as unbelievable as it might seem, like people have done those things, and it's crazy.
Yeah. Was the original short story, was it also a letter, or was it more of like your normal kind of story and then the
Yeah, it was
book
it was it was epistolary, and it
Okay.
featured just a few of the main characters that I ported over into the novel. The mother, Ginny Williker. I mean, not Ginny. The mother, Ginny Goodwinch. Ginny
Yeah.
Goodwinch, the woman who's kind of like just like
obsessed.
she, kind of obsessed with him, in love with him, but in a in a more romantic way. Like, I think he'd be a good father for my children kind of way.
Yeah.
So yeah, those two especially were kind of the main focus of that original short story. And in the original short story, it's interesting. I think all the characters were women, and that was another thing I didn't necessarily start out to do on purpose. But then once I realized it, I was like, oh, again, it makes it interesting that it's all women telling this story. Then when I expanded it into the novel, I kind of expanded it to include some men as well, because I felt the short story, it was that story, those women, it was their story. And it was kind of about a woman's relationship with this kind of person. In the novel, it got a little broader than that.
What was it about the story that you wanted to expand it into a full-length novel?
I didn't, like anything else, I kind of didn't really intend on turning it into a novel, but every once in a while I was trying to write some other stuff, I would brainstorm like a new character for it. Like, one of the first new characters I wrote for the novel was the character of this this character who's like in a metal band, and like that's his attraction, and he starts writing him letters. And I just thought it was a funny, interesting character. And I was like, oh, if I ever expanded it, I would include this guy, So, and then I would maybe, write out a few letters from this new character, not even fully intending on using it. But then I was working on another novel, a follow-up to my first novel, The Paradox Twins, which Clash also put out. And I was kind of hitting the wall with it. And I wanted to finish something and get something out, relatively quickly after the first novel. And relatively quickly being like, a couple of years. And so I was having issues with this one work in progress. And so I started thinking more and more about Purple Satin Killer and the kind of like extra little characters and chapters I had created. And I was like, oh, well, it'll be easy to expand this into maybe like a 20,000 word novella, something I could put out real quick as like a stopgap release, just to keep people's interest so they don't forget about me.
Yeah.
And of course, that was a huge mistake, because it wasn't easy. And 90,000 words, and 2 years later, here we are with Purple Satin Killer, the novel version.
Yeah, I feel like the way you wrote it, it all being letters, all epistolary, I feel like that would be a lot harder than just your traditional, tale of true crime story or murder mystery, or however you would write it.
I mean, especially since I wrote it out of order. That was really my big misstep, was writing it out of order, because then as it got bigger and bigger and I started kind of, sequencing it, I ran into problems with dates and people's ages and where they lived and the timeline and all that stuff. And being kind of a perfectionist, I wanted it all to make mathematical sense. Every letter is dated. There's a timeline of the murders. Every single murder has a specific date. I have the dates and names and places of all the murders mapped out. And, I wanted it all to flow cohesively and make sense. And even if, your average person would read it and not do the math in their head, it was important to me that it added up. So that was probably the most difficult thing about it. And what took the longest in the end was sequencing the letters. And I did everything from, I printed everything out. I had Excel spreadsheets, and they were color coded, and, collating the information in all these different ways, and printing everything out and flipping the pages around. And so, yeah, it was not the quick, easy fix I thought it was going to be.
Writing the letters out of order, did you write all of the letters for each character at a time, or were they mixed up too?
Well, there were a lot, like, as I went on, I would go back and add letters to a character, and because I would be like, oh, and then I got to pad out this story. I got to flesh this out. There's more to be said here, and it relates to this. And so there was some jumping back and forth, but like when I would come up with a new character, I would sit and like write 3 or 4 letters and kind of like map out their mini arc, you know, because each character who writes to this killer, they have like their own mini narrative arc, you know. So I would kind of map that out first, and then, you know, add to it where necessary.
Was that a challenge to have all these mini arcs, but you also have kind of the overall arc of Jonas being told as well? Was that a challenging thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, because sometimes I would come up with what I thought was a cool character, or, you know, just an interesting something based on an interesting factoid out of real life or something. And then I'd write a letter based on that. And then I'd be like, well, if I'm going to have multiple letters from this character, they have to have, you know, it has to be interesting, and they have to have their own arc. Otherwise it's just kind of, you know, it's not as going to be as fulfilling for the reader. And it's just going to seem more like just a random bunch of letters, you know?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how big of a challenge is that? You have several characters in here, and each one has their mini arc, you know, where it's probably sometimes hard enough just for one character in a novel to have its main arc. You have several. Like,
yeah.
how challenging is that? What was the mindset in going into these letters when you were writing them? Like, did you transform yourself to the mother, transform yourself to Jenny, to Candace, to, you know what I mean, and had to write from their point of view while also keeping the story straight with the actual main killer, even though he's not responding on our side?
Yeah, I mean, the characters like Ginny and the mother, I kind of had been with them the longest and knew them the best, so after a while they were kind of the easiest ones to write, you know. It was later on, as I was adding in characters and trying to, you know, shore everything up, that it got a little more difficult. But yeah, I mean, it was tough. I made a huge mistake thinking that it was going to be this quick, easy thing.
No, I mean, it's cool that you were able to do it. I mean, and they get involved. Some of these letters get involved. I'm interested to know, when you presented this to Clash, hey, I got this concept, a bunch of letters to a killer. What was their response? What was their reaction? How did you sell this to Clash? I mean, granted, Clash, for those who don't know, Clash, they have some oddities that are, you know, that are out there. Some books that are out there that are pretty cool, that a little bit different. You know, they're not straight horror, straight lit, you know, but and it fits perfectly with Clash. But what was their response when you brought this to them?
I mean, yeah, Clash is game for just about anything. And, you know, like I said, it did exist first as a short story, and the short story was a part of my story collection, Whispers in the Ear of a Dreaming Ape, which Clash did put out. It was the first book of mine that Clash put out. And so they were familiar with the story. And not only that, it was probably their favorite story in the collection. It was the leadoff story in the collection. And we even talked about at one point as that being the title of the story collection, which at the time I didn't really feel worked. And in retrospect, now I'm glad we didn't name it that, because it would present a whole nother set of problems now that I've written a whole book called Letters to the Purple Satin Killer.
Uh-huh.
But so basically that was, you know, another, that went along with the, oh, this is going to be an easy, quick sell, because I knew Clash liked just short stories. So
right.
In my head, it was already a yes, that I was like, hey, this story you like, let's make it a little longer and get it out there, you know? And then that's initially how I pitched it to them, and they were cool, and they were like, yeah, that sounds great, let's do it. And then a few months went by, and I'm like, hey, I'm still working on it. It's up to 30,000 words. I think I'm almost done. Then a few more months would go by, and I'd be like, all right, I think it's capping out at about 50. We're really getting there. You know, it's just like every time I ran in the beginning, my whole thing was, you know, like I said, quick and easy. I want to just get something done. And then as I was going along and I was, you know, encountering narrative problems, the answer always seemed to be flesh it out, you know? Yeah. And in my head, I was like, shit, I wanted this to be easy. I don't want to write more. And I would try to get around it somehow, and then hit that wall again. And that little voice in my head was like, idiot, Flesh it out. That's the problem. You got to flesh it out. And so once I started listening to that voice and just gave up all hope of it being this quick, easy thing, you know, and let it be the length it needed to be.
It's like you kept finding new letters.
Yeah,
new letters were uncovered. So
that's when the problems started solving themselves.
Yeah. Why make it? I can't even say that word. The E word, epistolatory. Yeah. Why make it like that and not just a regular straight novel? What is it about that format that drew you? I mean, it works, but what is it about that? Are you a fan of other stories and books that are written in that format? Or
definitely, I'm a big fan of kind of experimenting with form, and novels that kind of take on a different shape than your standard narrative story. Right. So I'm always looking for different ways to tell a story, just for my own sake, to keep myself entertained. And because when I see stories like that, I'm like, oh, this is cool. I wish I wrote this. I wish I thought of this. So, this one, like I said, it kind of lent itself to the epistolary format because it was about a guy in prison, and, guys right. in prison get tons of letters. So it was kind of a no-brainer to tell a story that way. But so I didn't force it, but once I was decided to tell the story that way, I was excited because I love telling stories in different ways. And the epistolary format is it's a format that's been around for a really long time. And there are tons of great epistolary novels, and a ton of great horror and crime epistolary novels. I think it really lends itself to those genres just because of the kind of the confessionary, the confessional nature.
You're an author. You can make up whatever word you want
to. Make up a word. We'll make a trend. Yeah.
The confessional nature of writing letters, and also the kind of voyeuristic aspect of reading someone's letters, maybe letters that aren't to you,
Yeah.
So to me, that's also really appealing.
I can see the voyeurism in it. Definitely. Paul Shepard in the chat here, he says it's similar to Rant by Chuck Palahniuk, and Palahniuk's someone who experiments with formatting and stuff too. So I kind of got that feeling that because he likes to change the way he writes stuff too. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Rant's a great novel. I'm a big fan. It's more of a kind of oral history, which you can kind of falls into the category of epistolary these days. Epistolary started out as just strictly letter writing, but it's kind of come to describe books that include all different sorts of ephemera and letters and magazine articles, newspaper clippings.
I think LaRocca's book was all was it emails? All emails back and forth?
Yeah, emails.
I guess something kind of like a letter, but
yeah, something like the Dennis Cooper novel. What's the one? Now I'm gonna blank on the name because I'm on the spot. The one where the whole thing is guys in chat rooms talking about sex workers.
Yeah. What is the name of that? Now it's going to be on my brain all night trying to figure that one out.
I literally reference that book in every interview I've done, and right now it's just gone from my brain.
Now I got to look it up. Great, thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
You kind of touched on that a little bit in the book with where the lady would post the poems on the forum and send back the comments to him and stuff.
Oh yeah, that was definitely a little bit inspired by that. Yeah, trying to kind of stretch the letter format and include other little formats. Yeah, it's definitely inspired by that.
So how much time did you spend thinking of all the different, I guess, types of people that would write him letters? Because you have memorabilia services and victims' friends and family, and the mom and people that are in love with him, and just weird sex things and all kinds of stuff. Were all these ideas just coming in, or were you researching things? Oh, these are letters that people have written serial killers of real life, or kind of combination of both?
Yeah, some of them came easier than others. Like I said, some were there from the beginning, the character of the mother obviously and Ginny and Candace were kind of like both inspired by making a murderer, the kind of like, you know, women being attracted to men in prison. So, and then there was like the preacher's daughter, which that was an early one, and then for the novel I came up with this, you know, this friend of his from when he was a child who was kind of like never really reconciled their relationship. And, you know, I found that I kind of tried to build like the emotion of the emotional parts of the novel through these characters, you know, because I didn't want it to just be a bunch of random people talking about random horrific stuff. I knew if I was going to get people to come along with me on this, there had to be some heart to it, you know? So there is all this kind of like harsh, weird, one-off stuff that I found like just scouring the internet and reading about serial killers and stuff and be like, oh, that's a cool, weird tidbit. Let me throw this guy in. Oh, that's another one. Let me throw that in, you know? Yeah. But it needed to have the foundation of the characters that brought, you know, emotion to it.
Because even the one-off ones, like the competing like memorabilia people, like even they have like a little arc where they don't like each other and they've done stuff in the past and stuff.
Yeah, like to me, though, there are two kind of main types of characters. Like I said, the kind of like the emotional ones, and then the more fun one-off ones. And that character was kind of more one of the fun ones that I forget exactly how that came about. I just initially, well, I was reading about, you know, murderabilia and people who collect memorabilia from serial killers, and I was like, oh, this is, you know, is an interesting character, a guy who sells, you know, serial killer memorabilia. And then I was like, well, what's this guy's arc? How do I make this interesting? Like, where do I go with this? And then I kind of came up with the idea of another guy competing with him, you know, in the same business, because otherwise it just would have been a guy who's like, hey, I sell weird shit, you know. Let me sell your fingernail clippings and your pubes and whatnot.
Then who are the people who buy it too? That might be a whole different book for
That's a whole new book. Yeah.
I think the Dennis Cooper book is Closer. Is it Closer or
no? That's not the one.
Frisk.
I probably have it right here. No, it's not Frisk either.
I'm dying over here.
And it's gonna be right
Jay,
back
you
here.
haven't read it. You don't even know what you're talking about.
No, I've read the Sluts. I read that
Sluts. That's it. It's Sluts. The Sluts.
I was gonna get it eventually.
How did I forget the title?
Forget that one.
I don't know.
And like I
don't know why I said Frisk. I should have said Sluts first.
I've been referencing it so much because of Letters to the Purple Satin Killer, and it's a book I've recommended all the time, and I don't know why I completely blanked on the Sluts.
How did you blank on the Sluts?
So, one thing I don't want to give it away, but the one inclusion was like some of the stuff from the anonymous person. I thought that was really cool because some of them have pictures. Or I guess their postcards have been sent, and I guess you find out later on what's kind of actually going on with that. I really like that kind of reveal of what the postcards were, because at first I just thought they were random postcards. But later you get into the book, you kind of figure out what those actually mean. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, you know, again, kind of inject some different forms into it, and also build a little bit of a mystery, not have everything be so cut and dry. You know, like I said, I use a lot of conflicting narratives, and you get conflicting information from different characters, and, you know, so not everyone's reliable, and you don't really know what the truth is a lot of times. And you know, the postcards kind of expands on that. You don't really know who they're coming from and what's going on. So I wanted to have a little more ambiguity. That's what I used to inject the ambiguity into the story.
There's one postcard, I won't give it away, but it connects to another person's letter. I was like, oh, that lines up really well. I like that. Kind of gives a clue as to maybe what happened. I'll maybe tell you there once we're done, because it's a spoiler. But
because I wanted people to. I wanted there to be like a little puzzle aspect of like people putting together like, oh, who is this? Who's sending these? Who is this in reference to? You know, and they do correspond. You know, there are some red herrings in there, but they do. I have an idea of like, who sent that and what that means. But I wanted that to be in there for people to have a little something where they could have their own little theories about what was going on there.
And there's also there's a survivor, someone who escaped him, who sends him letters, and I thought her arc was really interesting too.
Yeah, that
I don't know if she's kind of going crazy or what's going on with her by the time it's over for her arc. I really liked her arc too.
Yeah, she's another one of the more important characters in the book, and kind of influenced by there's this found footage or faux documentary horror movie I really liked called the Poughkeepsie Tapes. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and it has to do with a serial killer. And there was
probably.
Yeah, it's a good one, and it had to do with there was one aspect of it that had to do with like what's it called? Not Munchausen syndrome, but the other Stockholm syndrome. Where like people who get attached to people who have kidnapped them or whatnot, and like that kind of influenced that part of the story. Just how I wanted a character who might, you would think someone who escaped such a horrible situation would be happy and would be done with it, but there's kind of like a longing there, like someone who's been damaged and is like longing for the thing that damaged them.
Yeah, at the same time, it seemed like I was saying at the same time, the one that got away also seemed like they were kind of rubbing it in his face that
shifting the power dynamic over her
and that they're in power now, and that his life's over with, but their life continues. He couldn't finish the job basically because they got away.
Sure. So. Well, yeah, it kind of starts that way, but then like you see, it kind of reveals like they kind of either it was at front or they kind of fall back on these emotions, and they're like, forget what I said. I'm not the one in control. Please don't leave me. I love you. That kind of thing. Right. I thought that was an interesting dynamic.
Then you got to wonder, like, there's going to be a void in their life after the end.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was talking about, one of the postcards. You see that, and then later on from another letter, they're kind of linked. So was it important like the sequencing of the order you put all these letters in for the book? Did you work really hard on that?
Definitely, yeah. And towards the end, I was discovering new ways to link some of the characters and their stories. Like a lot of that I didn't discover till later on in the writing, and I feel that it's something that was important to me. It gives the novel as a whole much more cohesion. So a lot of those little connections weren't there until very close to the end, where I was like, oh, wait a minute, this corresponds with this, and these people are kind of connected in this way, and if I just tweak it a little bit, it brings it that much closer together.
There were two characters, I won't say who gets together, but there were two that end up intertwining. I was like, wow, that was kind of really strange how that happened, from the way they start out to what happens to them at the end.
And that was like kind of just organically as I was writing their stories. It just kind of made sense,
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite character to write from their perspective for?
That's tough. I mean, I did really enjoy the character of the best friend from childhood.
Oh yeah,
I think his name was William. I think, right, William.
Yeah. Like I got to. Again, he's another one I kind of discovered what he was about as it went along, and I'm really happy with where his story went. I just felt like, I didn't want it to be this black or white thing where like this person is obviously good or in the right, and this person is in the wrong. Like I tried to do with a lot of the characters, like the one that got away, like they're multifaceted and they've been hurt, but then there's like they do or say or think these things where the average person would be like, "Ooh, what are you, crazy? Like, why would you think that? Why would you do that? Look what happened to you," like. So I enjoyed his character because of the kind of ride his character took.
Yeah, his boyfriend was obnoxious. I didn't like his boyfriend at all, or his partner.
Well, that was like another thing. Like he's kind of like he seems better off, but he's kind of traded one sort of not abusive, but like one, less than
Just
perfect
imposing figure
relationship
kind of.
for another, like
Yeah.
always kind of relying on someone else to tell them what to do.
Mhm.
So why the piece of fabric, the purple satin fabric? Why is that the calling card? I know a lot of serial killers had a calling card, like a pattern or whatever. But how did you get to that, settle on that particular one?
That just came from way back in the beginning with the short story when I decided, all right, I'm writing a story. It's gonna be letters to this serial killer. It's got to have a catchy title.
Yeah.
This serial killer needs. I needed a name for the serial killer. I didn't just want it to be Jonas Williker. I wanted them to have like a title, like BTK or whatever, or just.
I mean, I'm going for a purple theme tonight. I don't know.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, they're kind of weird looking, but
Yeah.
Honestly,
so
I didn't know if it was. Go ahead. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, I just I was kind of searching for like a cool name. I'm like, this guy needs a cool name, and in my research, a lot of guys got their name from either how they killed or some sort of calling card they left or whatever, and I just kind of. I think I probably went through a few different ones before I settled on the fabric and the color. I'm like white fleece killer, blue cashmere killer. No, that doesn't sound quite right.
Flannel jacket killer. Oh,
yeah.
Too many colors.
Mohair. Purple satin. That's the one. That's
go.
it. Yeah.
I mean, it could have been silk, but satin might be cheaper. I don't know.
Well, I did I did a little research because at one point I asked my wife, I was like, are satin and silk the same thing? Like, and then I looked it up, and satin is a type of silk.
Oh,
okay. It has something to do with how it's woven that makes it satin. So it's kind of interesting. Learned something new there.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I got the book, I looked it up to see if this was a real killer that I had just never heard of before. So this all sounds legit. Like all these letters and stuff. Is this real? Is this fiction? Is this nonfiction? I had to look it up because I was curious. Yeah. I didn't know.
I had a couple early readers who said the same thing. They were like, I had to stop and go look it up and make sure this wasn't an actual real killer because it all seems so real to me.
The real thing, yeah.
And that's a huge compliment. I really appreciate that.
We'll have to wait and see if it ends up in libraries to see what part they put it in, the fiction or nonfiction. Like maybe you'll fake them out too. Yeah. Speaking of early readers, what's the feedback been like for you?
It's been really good. I've been really happy. I've made a pretty concerted effort to try to get it out there to as many people as possible. Specifically, like bookstagrammers and book talkers and like the horror groups on Facebook and stuff like that. People who just kind of like non-professional people who read and review and share because
that's like we're non-professionals,
just like you guys, because like as far as review stuff, it's just because like honestly those are kind of more important and make a bigger difference when like people who read because they love it and review because they love it and want to share the stuff they love. You get the right people to really embrace something, and then that's how you get word of mouth. That's really what sells a book these days is word of mouth.
Yeah.
I can get like I was talking to someone else recently, and I was lucky enough to get a bunch of really good blurbs for this book. Like I had a huge list. I sent it out to a bunch of pretty high profile writers like Paul Tremblay blurbed the book for me, Clay McLeod Chapman blurbed the book for me, Rob Hart, who I have a past relationship with, but he's got a more high profile writer at this point.
Is he the one that came out the new Assassins book? Is that
he wrote Assassins Anonymous. I know him because we work together at Lit Reactor. But like people like that and who blurbed the book, and I'm really grateful for that. And you would think, but I was having a conversation with someone and they were like, "Oh man, you got such great blurbs for the book," and I was like, almost half jokingly, "Yeah, well, we'll see if that actually sells any books or not," you know, because it doesn't always. You know, it looks great, and lots of people read Paul Tremblay's books. Lots of people read Clay McLeod Chapman's books, but that doesn't necessarily read. They're going to read every book that they kind of, you know, say, "Hey, this was good. I like this." You know, I mean, maybe if Stephen King blurbs your book, you know, you're going to see a significant uptick in readers. But
yeah,
I feel like the really important thing is to connect with, you know, actual readers and like the people who are reviewing because they like a book, you know, and if you get them to really champion your book, that's when you're gonna see a difference. So
yeah, well, that's actually how the show was kind of born, because we both did YouTube videos of reviews. Booktube is what it was called. I couldn't think of what it was called, Brad.
Booktube.
Yeah, we used to do our review. Well, he still does every now and then, but just make a video on YouTube and review a book. That's what we used to. And the show kind of created from that. So, yeah. So the normal people. It's the normal people. We were reading stuff and reviewing it for the normal, not the
the normies.
Yeah, for the, you know, our neighbors and stuff. So
yeah, because I mean, I don't know. That's like, it's just, I don't know what I was gonna say there. I lost my thought. But anyway, yeah, exactly. It's the normal people. If they champion your stuff, you know, you could have reviews in magazines and stuff like that. But you know, you want people who actually love reading to read your book.
Well, I'm sure your IP address, your computer is marked by the FBI now for the research. So, what do you say we test your knowledge a little bit of? Of serial killers, if we could do that.
I'm gonna say up front.
These are easy, because I came up with them.
Okay, my recall of like trivia and facts and stuff is so bad. And as we saw with the sluts, even if it's a book I've read multiple times and love, like if I get put on the spot, but let's do it. Let's go for it.
These are easy.
All right.
My system's probably marked now because I looked up serial killer trivia earlier today, and then so they're like probably watching what I'm doing right now. So
all right.
Jay, you want to do a killer quiz, Jay?
Yeah,
quiz.
So we're gonna call it
so stupid.
Killer quiz.
Killer quiz.
Let's go for it.
KWI.
That's what you came up with?
That's what I came up with, Jay. I was busy today.
Nice.
Okay.
We'll see. Hey, don't talk trash about my video unless your questions are not good. We'll see what your questions are, because usually they're terrible, Jay.
The questions are the important part.
Well, the thing is, like, we've done games in the past, and when I've put together the questions,
they're usually terrible.
No, they're usually they just usually stump the guest. I mean, these are pretty easy this time. I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see.
Number one, Robert Ressler coined the term serial killer while a member of the Criminal Apprehension Program in what organization during the 1970s?
The FBI.
Yeah, see, that's simple. That's easy. Anybody who's watched Mindhunter knew that too.
Yeah. I figure even if you didn't know it, you could make a pretty good guess.
Yeah,
pretty good guess on that one.
I mean, you got FBI. You could say a few others, but that would come to my mind. So, okay, number two, Thomas Harris's 1981 novel Red Dragon marks the first appearance of what dubious serial killer who was famously portrayed by Anthony Hopkins a decade later?
That would be Hannibal Lecter.
There you go. Okay. This one I didn't know because I'm not much. I mean, I know the rapper, but I'm not into rap music. But
we'll see if I can get this one in.
Yeah. Serial killer Ted Bundy is referenced in the song Stay Wide Awake by what famous Detroit rapper?
Oh, well, I probably wouldn't know the answer, but Detroit makes me think it's Eminem.
Yeah. Let's see. 3 for 3. Did you do that one, Brad?
Was it Marshall Mathers? Was it Eminem, or was it the real Slim Shady?
Oh, for that, I have
dude.
No idea.
Yeah. What? Okay. Shut up, Brad.
Hey, he had a new CD drop the other day, just so people know.
Yeah.
What killer was never caught after a string of California murders in the 20th century? Ooh. This killer self-identified with a cross circle symbol.
That would be the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah. I said, yeah, like, that was exciting or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
just because that makes me think of the movie Zodiac, the Fincher movie,
Yeah.
which is such a great, one of the
That's a good one.
best serial killer movies ever made.
This one was new to me. I didn't know these nicknames, these alternative monikers, but the Whitechapel Murderer and Leather Apron are two alternative monikers used to refer to what famous London serial killer?
That would be Jack the Ripper.
Yes. Did the London part give it away, or did you really know that?
I know that it's the Whitechapel murders.
Okay.
That's what they called his murders.
Okay. So your favorite serial killer, Ted Bundy. Yay! I got
close friend of mine. Close friend of mine.
I got the T-shirt. I'm in a fan
That'll
club.
be the one clip they take out of context for the entire episode.
Yeah, really.
Josh is big buddies with Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Some people in black suits will show up at my house tomorrow and your place too, and just start questioning this. Ted Bundy is an American serial killer who rose to infamy during a string of 70s atrocities. Bundy was eventually caught and legally killed via what method?
How did they kill Bundy? Was it? I'm not so sure. I want to say lethal injection. Is that wrong? If not, then did they give him the electric chair?
They gave him the chair.
Like he was probably one of the last ones to get.
I was gonna say it might have been was he the last one that got the chair?
Was you say the 70s? Is that when he died?
And that was into the 80s.
Well, when did they killed him in the 80s, right? His murders were in the 70s, I think. We need an expert in the chat.
I'd say he was probably one of the
real
last high profile people to probably get the chair then if it was the 80s.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you missed your first one. All right. A couple more here.
All right.
Which killer of boys and young men performed as Pogo the Clown at charitable events and children's parties?
Mr. John Wayne Gacy.
John Wayne Gacy. Okay.
You said something in the book about him. I don't know if you remember, but that he gave his brain to science. Was that true?
Oh yeah, that's true. He gave his brain to science, and they continue to study it to this day. As new techniques and stuff are invented, they try them out on his brain and try to kind of see if they can figure out what makes a serial killer tick.
That's crazy. It would still be in good enough condition to experiment on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they got it right away. And then another related fact that also wound up in the book is that Jeffrey Dahmer, I think he left his brain to science or wanted to, and then his mother and father got in like a legal battle over it where one wanted to and one didn't want to. And eventually I think they wound up whoever just wanted to cremate it with the rest of his body won out. So they didn't get to study old Jeffy's brain.
Yeah, that's too bad.
It's too bad. Who knows what we might learn.
Which killer was known for eating parts of his victims?
Jeffrey Dahmer.
That's just kind of ironic and coincidental that we were talking about that. So, all right, final one here.
Did Ed Gein eat people too, or did he only killed one person though, didn't he?
I don't know how many people he killed, but I think he ate faces and stuff. Yeah.
I know he's based. I know Leatherface is based on
Leatherface. Yeah.
Did he eat people, or did he just chop them up?
I know he made like
their parts.
lamps and belts and stuff with their skin, weird stuff.
He might have ate a person or two. You gotta assume he at least had a nibble to try.
Put together a lamp out of somebody's leg. He might have ate a toe or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
To be named a serial killer, final one, by the way. So let's finish strong. To be named a serial killer, what is the minimum amount of victims over separate events?
Is it 3?
Close. Brad, what do you got?
Go 4. I'll one up him. we'll raise you $1.
It's actually only 2, but they have to be separate events, though. So
I guess that makes sense. But what if someone kills 2 people and stops? I guess it is.
But if they're separate events, I say they do one today and then do one on Wednesday. Yeah,
But what if you got a serial killer who's killed like 15 people, and then like they're hanging out at the serial killer club, and a guy comes in and he's like, "Yeah, I killed 2 people." They're gonna be like, "You're not a real serial killer."
Well,
Get outta here.
initiation to the club's probably 5.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for the FBI to label him,
Mm.
it must be 2.
What if you just happen to make 2 bad mistakes a few years apart?
Yeah.
Are you really a serial killer?
Bad food poisoning. Two.
Yeah.
It looks like
just
looks like Ed Gein only killed 2 people. He was suspected
Really?
of others, but 2 confirmed. Because I feel
Wow.
like he didn't kill. I didn't feel like he killed that many people.
that's
Looks like
crazy
he
because he's
mutilated.
But did he have other
dead
people in
though.
his family that kill people too, or
I don't know. It says he murdered 2 confirmed murders, 7 suspected, and he mutilated 9 corpses. So I think he was digging people up and doing stuff with them.
he's suspected for the other ones, but he was never.
But only 2
Charged
confirmed,
with it.
so maybe that's
Yeah,
why it's
yeah.
2.
I mean,
Because he's considered.
he probably did it.
I'm sure he did. Yeah.
I mean, though, but like digging up and mutilating corpses, is that really that bad? Like, you're not a killer.
Yeah.
You know, if Ed Gein had just dug up and mutilated corpses and never actually killed anyone, he wouldn't be a serial killer.
And he would not be as famous as he is.
So that's true. He'd just be a really weird dude.
Yeah.
He would just be the neighbor. I mean,
Yeah, like, oh, that's my neighbor. He likes to.
he was always quiet, but there's always a smell coming from his place.
Yeah.
Every news report starts out that way.
So are you a fan? Are you a big fan of true crime? Was that something you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy true crime, especially, documentary stuff. And now these days, there's just so much true crime content, on streaming and whatnot, Netflix. And, it's almost too much now. It's like, all right, already.
You can't hide from it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's like, it's not as special as it used to be.
Yeah.
Like, oh, once in a while, I'll allow myself some true crime documentary as a treat. But now it's just like, it's like eating ice cream every night. It's not.
You become desensitized and jaded.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
You watch
But
an
I mean,
episode of True Crime, and you're like, okay, yeah.
and also
but
too,
like
like a lot of
Netflix-
these.
Netflix
A
has
lot
a
of
new
these-
one like every week.
Yeah, there's so much, and like for a while, I was watching all of them, and I was getting a little burnt out. And then you do start to feel a little icky, like I'm living in this 24 hours a day. But it's like a lot of these new series too. They really seem to like stretch it out and pad it out. It's not like well, it's not serious killer, but like true crime, like something like Thin Blue Line, which is like a masterpiece of a movie, and it's however long it is, 90 minutes, 2 hours. And they tell that entire story. And now they got a Netflix series on a guy, and they stretch it out to like 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Is it the stairs? Isn't that just about the person that fell down the stairs and it's like 10 episodes?
Oh
long?
yeah,
Like the husband pushing
actually-
down the stairs or whatever happened.
yeah. I think there's the original documentary, The Stairs, and it was like 4 hours long. And I think that was like pre-Netflix when that was made. And I think recently there was like they made like a mini series of it, like a fictional account of it,
Okay.
which I didn't see, but I did see that original documentary is really good. Yeah, it's about this guy. He was kind of a famous writer, and his wife died. He claimed she fell down the stairs. But then they were like digging into his past and found out like he was having affairs and all this stuff. And then like there were all these crazy theories, like an owl ripped her scalp.
Wasn't an owl
like,
came in the window or something? Yeah.
But like it sounds crazy, but then when they present it and stuff, like it seems kind of credible,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a really good one. I think I think recently they had like made like a follow-up to like years later, like because I think the guy wound up in jail for it. And he's still claiming like an owl did it or something.
It's such a bizarre. Yeah, because I feel like I remember the owl thing because it was just such an odd aspect of it.
Yeah. And
So
I mean, if you watch all of those and you get so into them, then you go to family functions and that's all you talk about, and they start you start getting the stares from people, and they're like, yeah, that's just cousin Josh. We don't talk to him too much now,
Yeah,
he's got a fascination with BTK killer, and he's got posters on his wall, and so
it's funny though. You get a
ahead.
lot of like, you're hanging out with the family, whatever, and you're talking with a cousin or aunt or uncle about like what they're watching on TV lately, and you mention some true crime thing, and then 9 times out of 10, like they'll look around and whisper, be like, "You watch those too? I love those." Like,
big secret, yeah. What do you think our fascination is with true crime? Like, just kind of the morbid, because your book's nonfiction, your book's fiction, but it feels like a nonfiction, like a true thing. And you watch the documentaries and stuff. What do you think? Just, I guess, as like a culture, our obsession is with true crime stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
your opinion.
There's the whole like Psych 101 thing about being able to confront what scares you in a comfortable place, in a place where you don't feel threatened. That's kind of like the reason they give why a lot of people like violent horror movies and stuff like that. Right. But and that makes sense to me. Although I do think it is a little different when it comes to true crime stuff, because it is real stuff that happened to real people, and there are people like survivors who are watching basically their trauma being turned into entertainment for people. And I think that's a conversation that's been coming up a lot more recently about kind of like the monetization of people's trauma. And when you think about it that way, it's I don't know, it gives me pause, that I'm consuming this stuff, and it's entertainment, and you could say it's newsworthy, it's being presented for whatever public benefit, whatever, but in the end, it is about, it's no coincidence that we're getting more and more of it, because it's what people want. So people want something, and they're going to get more of it because it sells. So there is something. I'm not necessarily saying like people who watch too much of this stuff are going to become serial killers. Like that's not really realistic. But there is something to be said about, I don't know, just how we just like how we treat other people's grief and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always feel hesitant to say I like true crime, because that seems like not the right word. It's more like I'm curious about it.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is like they're stories, they're human stories, and a lot of them are inherently mysteries. And at least for me, that's probably one of the most fascinating parts, is the mystery of this stuff. And then finding like people really do get invested in finding out the truth, and also like the justice angle of stuff with something like the West Memphis 3, where those documentaries were made, and those kids were sitting in jail for like years and years, and through the documentaries and the awareness it raised, they were eventually not technically exonerated, but released from prison.
Yeah, there was that special deal they took where it's like they still have it on their record that they were guilty, but it's not enough to keep them in there. And
because the government doesn't want to admit culpability, that they did something wrong, so they're like, all right, we'll let you go, but we're still not going to say we made a mistake.
And if you watch those too, because I got really invested in that whole story, you saw it was a small town that just dropped the ball everywhere with the investigation. With that, like there was so much that they missed and so little that they did, because there was these 3 weird kids, basically. This could be a whole another 2 hours to talk about that whole case. I got really invested in that. So
I've seen all those movies and the follow-ups, and like it was fascinating. And I think in that case, one of the reasons people get so invented is like they really feel the injustice of it and want to see, the right thing done. But I don't necessarily think that's the case with all true crime media. Some of it is a lot more salacious than others, and doesn't maybe necessarily have its heart in the right place.
Like the stuff with like Zodiac and stuff, that's the mystery for me. Like who was it? Same with like Jack the Ripper and ones like that we'll never know. And then with the one like the Memphis 3 and the one you talked about earlier, the Making a Murder, like I remember watching that one, was like, he didn't do anything, they're setting him up or whatever. Like, I was so invested in it, thinking that the small town had set him up or whatever.
It's fascinating.
There's different aspects of the things, I guess, too.
Definitely.
If you look at the true crime, and then you look at all the documentaries and stuff you have, then you look at the other side of it, the entertainment factor, where they're making these fictional movies, but so many of them are based on true crimes.
Yeah, it's
They're
like
taking
Zac Efron is Ted Bundy or whatever.
how many Jack the Ripper movies are out there and series and stuff, that they're taking, and they're kind of making some of these serial killers iconic in a way because they're glorifying, we got a whole series on this killer from London now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's an entertainment factor to make a buck, really.
I feel like it's always been like that. Like the killers become famous almost like these movie stars in a way, and then like you can never remember like the victims' names. At least I can't.
Right.
I can't name like any of the victims.
Right.
Like I can sometimes kind of remember the actress with the Charles Manson murders. Every now and then I can remember her name, but like for the most part, I couldn't tell you one victim's name.
How many Dahmer movies have there? And
I could rattle off all these serial killers.
Yeah.
It's such a twisted thing to focus on them instead of the victims.
And that's another kind of reason why I made Letters to the Purple Satin Killer all letters from the other people, not just from him, because they're not necessarily all victims. But it's been in some way either related to victims or, had some sort of relationship with him, and I wanted it to keep it from really like descending into that, glorification of, someone who's done these awful things by making the story from these other people's point of view and making it about their stories more than the killer's stories. I felt that was kind of a good way of doing that.
I feel like that was a really unique format for the whole thing. It all being from other people and all being letters. I really enjoyed. I don't think I've read anything really like it. Even other epistolatory stuff. This feels quite different from that kind of stuff because there's like an arc. There's all these little arcs in one overall arc. I really enjoy the way
this is a lot more in depth, I think, than some of the other epistolatory.
You've got like the timeline in the back and like all the characters in the front. Every letter, if it was someone new, I'd go back to the front and say, "Oh, this is." Whoever this is, the Call of Duty player, or the autograph account, or whatever. I like that you did that in the front, having the correspondence names and.
Yeah, again, that was important to me because I took so much time with the timeline and the dates and all that stuff, and I wanted it to be accessible for the reader so they could reference it in case they were confused, almost like in real true crime books where they have, the timeline and dates and stuff like that. Yeah.
I did every time it was someone new, I would go back and reference the beginning. It's like, okay, that's who this person is. So I really like that you added that in.
And that's especially for me because like I'm a person who if I read a book and there's like a ton of characters, like I'm immediately like, what the hell? I don't know who's who, and I gotta like write down names and stuff to keep everything straight.
Yeah.
So speaking of, you had so many. There's like, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but there's like 30 or 40-ish people who have written letters from their perspective. How hard was it to make each individual person like have their own voice, where they didn't feel like, oh, Josh wrote all these letters under these characters' names? They're like, this is Judith and this is Abigail and so on.
Yeah, that was definitely another big concern that was important to me, and that kind of falls under the same umbrella of the kind of like the timeline and math stuff. Just my kind of obsessiveness over everything has to be its own thing and stand out and in order. And that was one of the things I was worried about, was just having, because there are so many different letter writers, just having the voices kind of just blend together and all basically just sounding like my voice. I did a similar thing with my first novel, The Paradox Twins, just to a much lesser extent. There was maybe 3 or 4 different characters, and it was kind of like a compilation of excerpts from different books they had written. And so one was like a memoir and one was like a fictionalized account, and then it had some other, there were like elements of screenplay and stuff in it. And so I did that there, but this was on a much bigger level. And with the Paradox Twins, I gave myself rules for the 3 or 4 different main characters and how I wrote their voice, where I would be like, all right, this one, because they're younger, they'll use less formal language, they'll use contractions, they'll use slang, they'll maybe say things grammatically incorrect. And then this character, because they're older and they're a school teacher, their writing will be more formal, they'll use bigger words. Then another character, just stuff like that, basically, like these kind of grammatical rules. And with Letters to the Purple Satin Killer, I couldn't really be that exact with every single one.
Yeah.
I did do stuff where, like, with the mother Judith, like I would say, like, oh, she's older, so she wouldn't, use a lot of contractions or stuff like that. Or this character, because they're younger, they're gonna have this character will have very short sentences. This character will write in like run-on sentences, So I did a lot of stuff like that, and then just basically who they were kind of then dictated the voice. I feel like, some have more space and are more obvious than others, like, the mother and Ginny, like, it was too hard. Like I so it's basically like who they were as characters kind of dictated their voice. I feel,
the author that writes them a few times, his intros always crack me up because he was like, "What's up, fuck stick," or whatever he said every time. It's like Elmer or somebody. I can't remember. But he cracked me up every time.
L. Ron James, I believe.
Yeah, that's him. L. Ron.
Yeah, I kind of based him, not hidden, the famous crime writer, because he speaks in this weird slang and is like very kind of like pompous and over the top and talking about himself as like the greatest writer in the world and stuff like that. So,
his letters crack me up. I loved his intros every time.
Letters to the Purple Satin Killer. That's what we're talking about this evening. Joshua Chaplinsky. August 6th is what we're looking at for a release from Clash. Definitely, I think both Brad and I, we recommend, right? I'm going to speak for you, Brad.
I really liked I did. It was very different. And I just love the layout of it. How it told a story.
It would be great if he said no. His answer was no.
I was waiting. He's going to say no one of these episodes. One of these episodes, he's going to say no.
He's like, nah, not really. I didn't quite care for it.
We're just trying to embarrass the guest, but
I'd just be
Joshua,
like, all right, thanks.
Well, we appreciate you wanting to stop by and chat about this with two bozos with microphones here. We appreciate that, and good luck in the future with this book. I think, word of mouth, like we were talking about earlier. I've already seen a lot of people say they've checked it out, so I think it's going to be pretty cool once the release date, more people pick it up.
Awesome. Well, I mean, thank you guys so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you helping me spread the word.
Yep. Joshua Chaplinsky, our guest for this evening, again, August 6th, from Clash, Letters to the Purple Satin Killer. Be sure to pick that up. And that's a wrap for this Saturday edition of Paper Cuts. For the co-host over there, Brad, all the way to Kentucky, I'm Jay. Thanks to our special guest, Josh. And that's a wrap, everyone. See you next time. See ya.
Josh, we appreciate you hanging out. I really enjoyed the book. It was really cool, especially just the way it was laid out. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. It means a lot.
Jay. Love you, Jay.
I know you do. This is where you have to end it now.